Brian Roberts over here, who is one of our physical therapists. He will be doing our next demonstration, and I will turn it to him to do a brief intro about himself. But let's welcome Brian to the stage.
Thank you, Jake. Hi, everyone. So, as Jake said, my name is Brian Roberts. I'm a physical therapist. I work right here at HSS Sports Rehab, right around the corner in Harbor Point. So if you're ever in the area, come by and say hi to us. I specialize in orthopedics, so we see a lot of orthopedic patients, a lot of athletes, and what I want to talk to you about today is posture and ergonomic setup for your desk, okay? So a lot of us, most of us probably work at a desk most of the day, and a lot of times it can be hard to get out of one position as we're working throughout the day. So we're going to go through just a couple little tips and tricks to set your desk up in a posture-friendly way, and then we'll go through a couple very simple exercises and stretches that you can incorporate throughout the day to try and get you moving a little bit. So first we'll talk about desk setup. So very popular these days is a desk that we can basically change from a sitting to a standing desk. So I always highly recommend these to my patients just because it's a very easy way to get us out of that sitting position all day. So if we can get up on our feet as much as possible, improve some blood flow, get our joints moving a little bit, and help prevent us feeling stiff and sore and maybe developing pain in our back or in our neck. So standing, sitting desk, always recommended. If you can change your position every hour or so, that would be ideal. On top of that, we like to think about the position of our monitor. So ideally we want the monitor at about eye height or maybe even a little bit lower. And what that does is it puts our neck in an optimal position so that we're not in that classic forward head position that we all are guilty of falling into as we're sitting at our desk. So monitor at eye level. We also like to think about our keyboard. So we don't want our keyboard too high, we don't want it too low. So basically a good way to kind of figure out where to put it is if you put your arms straight by your sides and bend your elbows should be at 90 degrees. Right where your hands sit should be a good ideal spot to have your keyboard sitting. Now, if you have a good work setup at home or in your office, ideally you'll have a separate monitor and a separate keyboard. It will be a little bit tougher to do with a laptop. Moving on, we like to think about the desk chair that we use. So there's a lot of different options for desk chairs out there. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but a couple of things I like to think about when trying to choose a desk chair are things like lumbar support, right? So a lot of these desk chairs now have that built in. Basically what it is the lower part of the backrest will extend out into your body to support your lower back. And basically it helps you just sit upright a little bit better so that you're not in that slouched posture. Some desks have a better lumbar support system, or chairs have a better lumbar support system than others. If you find your chair does not have a good lumbar support, we always recommend using a little towel roll and putting it right behind your lower back, and it helps you sit up nice. Outside of that, we like to think about the position of our feet when we're sitting. We want our feet to be nice and flat on the ground, and we want our knees to be a little bit lower than our hips to put our back in a good position. So a chair that is easily adjustable in its height is always recommended. So those are a couple things about our setup at our desk. Now we'll just run through some very simple and easy stretches and exercises to do that you can incorporate throughout the day just to keep yourself moving. So like I mentioned before, we oftentimes find ourselves in this position where our head is forward, our shoulders are rounded, and our lower back is kind of rounded too. So starting from top to bottom, there's three very simple movements that you can incorporate while you're working to try to get ourselves out of this position. So the first one we call the chin tuck. So basically you can use your fingers to assist yourself, and you're basically just bringing your chin backwards and bringing your ears over your shoulders to try to sit up straight. And what this does is it gets our neck out of that position that can basically just cause strain on our muscles, our tendons, our ligaments, and joints as we're sitting throughout the day. So chin tuck, you can do a couple repetitions, you can hold it for a couple seconds, very easy to incorporate throughout your workday. Next, we think about our shoulders. So in order to get our shoulders out of that rounded position, very simply, we can bring our shoulders back, squeeze the shoulder blades together, again, hold it for a couple seconds, and then relax. Do it a couple times throughout the day. That can help you get out of that position as well. And then finally, we think about our low back, right? So oftentimes we're kind of slouched like that. It's just the position that we fall into. So doing something we call a pelvic tilt can help get our lower back moving. And I like to put my hands on my hips, and basically all you're doing is rolling your hips forward and backwards. And that can be done in standing or sitting, and it can help get some blood flow to the area in our lumbar spine, get those segments moving, and help prevent some of that stiffness and pain we might develop as we are sitting or standing throughout the day. Now we can take this one step further and we can add a little bit of resistance to a couple of these exercises. So very simply, resistance bands are great because we can keep them right by our desk, and they're also a nice reminder. If you leave it in sight, it'll remind you to do some of these exercises. So real simple for your shoulders, the first one you would do is with your elbows straight, you're just gonna pull the band apart and then slowly return forward. And you should kind of be thinking about squeezing your shoulder blades together. You might start to feel some fatigue in those postural muscles that help keep you upright. So super simple, you can do 10 in a row, and you can do that a couple times throughout the day to keep you moving. And then finally, with your elbows bent and your palms up towards the ceiling, pulling out and again squeezing those shoulder blades together, and then slowly returning back, and again doing about 10 in a row. So very easy to do throughout the day, very simple, and you can incorporate it as much as you want really, and any way to keep you moving and get you out of the position you're typically in while working can help prevent any sort of postural related pain, stiffness, or soreness that you might develop throughout the workday. So hopefully you can take a couple of these little tips home and incorporate them throughout the day just to keep you moving and keep your joints happy. Any questions? Aaron?
Are there a set number of repetitions that you should do? I know you should do it throughout the course of your day, but do you have a general guideline of how many you can do?
Yeah, so typically we say anywhere around 10 repetitions is usually a good start. If you feel like you want to do more, that's always great too, but we like to say around 10 repetitions. You can start with one set, and I would prefer you to do one set and then spread out the sets throughout the day. So maybe like 3 sets total throughout the day, so that you're just moving more frequently as opposed to doing 3 sets all in one shot. Yes. Sure. Absolutely. So definitely. So standing desks are always recommended by us just because it can get you out of that seated position. So one that can very easily transition is usually more beneficial so that you can change your position as much as possible. So I would always recommend anywhere from like every 30 to 60 minutes if you can get yourself up in a standing position, even if you're only standing for 5 to 10 minutes at a time. It can certainly be longer, but a little bit goes a long way just so that you're not sitting hours and hours and hours throughout the day.
When you're standing, should you be moving as well, or just the standing?
Absolutely, you could be moving, right? So any sort of movement, any sort of change in your position is always great. So I always like to think about like shifting your weight back and forth, even just like kind of moving your neck around, doing those little chin tucks, squeezing your shoulders back. The more you do that throughout the day, the less likely you are to develop some of that stiffness and joint pain from being in one position for a while. Definitely, circulation, get your muscles pumping, which actually helps circulation and helps venous return, so it helps the blood flow back to our heart. So it can have a lot of different benefits.
I find that when I sit, I carry a lot of my pressure on my shoulders.
Sure.
Any recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times, a lot of us can carry a lot of stress here, a lot of tension here.
They call it text neck.
Yeah, text neck or tech neck, right? So any sort of these exercises that get us out of this position, right? These muscles here called our upper trap muscle typically gets very tight, and they can become what we call dominant. So they get almost too strong compared to our other muscles around that area, right? Because we typically just punch our shoulders. So using those 2 exercises I showed you with the band can actually strengthen the muscles below that big upper trap muscle, and that can help hold a little bit less tension in your shoulders up here and help you keep you upright throughout the day more, so that you don't shrug your shoulders as much. Right? So usually more strengthening below that area is what we would recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it safe to have a partner to practice
It's a really good question.
I just realized I could use, you know, where they stand in the middle of your back and push on something.
Yeah, so cracking your back is definitely not a bad thing. It's safe to do. I would recommend, if you are going to do it, I would recommend a professional do it. I don't recommend your spouse or friend or significant other, you know, jumping on your back and trying to crack it. It's a safe thing to do. I would recommend seeing a professional. If you can do it yourself, very safe, very fine to do. Basically, it's just releasing pressure in our joints, and it can feel good because pressure builds up over time as we are stagnant. So safe to do, but I would recommend seeing a professional if you want to do it.
That do it themselves will crack your neck constantly.
Yeah, I would say constantly. I wouldn't want you doing it every 10-15 minutes. Throughout the day a couple times, probably fine. Probably fine.
Follow-up question.
Yep.
Is it true that cracking your knuckles or your back or any joints causes arthritis?
No, not typically. Studies show that that doesn't really have an effect on arthritis, actually. Again, I wouldn't recommend doing it constantly throughout the day, but doing it here and there, no problem. Yep. Jake? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
How long is too long sitting at a desk?
Great question. In an ideal world, I would say if you can get up every 20 to 30 minutes, even if it's just to stand and get out of the seat for a minute or two, that would be ideal. Now, sometimes with our jobs, it's hard to do that. So I would say at a minimum, every hour, if you can stand and move around a little bit, that would work too.
Awesome.
Yep. Jake?
All right. For someone recovering from a back injury, lower back, seating, do you recommend anything to support that lower back, more lumbar, like
Yep.
one of the, like a half ball type
Sure.
thing?
Absolutely. So definitely a desk chair with lumbar support can go a long way. If you don't have one, or if you feel like you need more, a towel roll can be great. So just take a little bath towel, roll it up into a little roll, put it right behind your lower back, and that can help hold you up and help your posture a little bit to take some stress off of your lower back. That's usually what I would recommend.
What is the best way to lift up things from the floor? How would you do it?
Sure. So ideally, we want to think about keeping our back straight, using our legs to pick things up. So I'm going to show you the wrong way to do it first, right? And a lot of times, this is like the lazy way. Rounded back, you're not bending your legs. And not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but it leaves us a little more vulnerable to injury if we're not bending the right way. So in an ideal world, we would keep our back straight, we would use our legs, and we would pick something up that way.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Thank you, guys.
Bring up our last speaker. Thank you, Brian.